So, normally, when a billionaire's will is read today, it's a highly predictable transaction. Like the family gathers in some sterile conference room, a lawyer slides a stack of paper across this big mahogany table, and the oldest child gets the controlling shares of the estate.
Right, everyone just nods along.
Yeah, everyone nods. It is this clean legal process governed by very predictable rules. But, well, if you rewind the clock to like 1850 BC and step into the world of ancient Near Eastern patriarchal blessings, that predictability just shatters completely. We are looking at a prophetic landscape that is, quite honestly, terrifyingly honest. So, welcome to Reformed Thinking. I am thrilled you are joining us for this deep dive into Genesis chapter 49, verses 1 through 4.
Yes.
Our mission today is to analyze this striking deathbed scene that really destroys the modern illusion that an earthly pedigree guarantees success.
It really does. I mean, we are looking at a historical moment where human expectations just collide violently with divine reality. It is a severe passage, right?
Right.
And the implications, well, they ripple across the rest of biblical text.
Yeah, so let us set the scene for you. The year is roughly 1850 BC. We are in the land of Egypt, and the patriarch Jacob is dying.
Right.
His life has been this long, incredibly difficult trajectory. I mean, he spent decades wrestling with God, fleeing from enemies, and mourning children he thought were dead.
Yeah, the grief was immense.
And now his vision is failing, his body is giving out, and he summons his 12 sons into this dimly lit chamber. And, this is not a sentimental family good guy.
No, not at all.
It is not a father handing out warm, fuzzy memories. It is a prophetic courtroom. The future of an entire nation is about to be decreed, and right in the center of this suffocating tension stands Reuben.
The firstborn son?
Right, the firstborn. He had every natural advantage, every title, and every privilege you could possibly want in that culture. Yet, in a single sentence, his father strips it all away.
Just takes it all.
Yeah. So we're going to look at why that happened and how the answer challenges everything you might think you know about privilege, hidden actions, and the sovereign decrees of God.
Yeah, to really grasp the gravity of this scene, we have to look at the historical and geographical stage. So the family of Jacob is completely isolated in the land of Goshen.
Okay.
And this is occurring during Egypt's Middle Kingdom period, likely, the 12th dynasty. So this was an era marked by a highly developed administrative state. You had massive agricultural projects, strict social hierarchies, all of that.
Right.
And because Joseph is the vizier, essentially the prime minister of the most advanced civilization on earth, the family enjoys this protected, prosperous status.
But, I mean, they are living under Joseph's political umbrella, but they are still very much outsiders.
Yeah.
Like, they do not blend in.
Oh, not at all. They are nomadic shepherds living in a highly agrarian settled society. And to the indigenous Egyptians, well, shepherds were culturally repulsive.
Wow.
Yeah, the Egyptians viewed them as dirty, uncivilized wanderers. And because of that cultural friction, the family was segregated in Goshen, which was this highly fertile region in the eastern Nile Delta.
So they were given good land, but they were kept at arm's length.
Yeah, well, yes, precisely. That geographical and cultural isolation was a providential preservation tactic. It kept the chosen family from assimilating into the pagan idolatry of the Egyptian empire.
Right.
They were, in a sense, locked in an incubator.
Which is fascinating because, redemptively speaking, this scene represents a massive shift. I mean, God had promised Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars and would inherit the land of Canaan.
Right.
And up until this point, that promise was carried by isolated individuals. It went from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob. But inside this dimly lit chamber, the family is transitioning.
They are.
They are moving from a localized, single-thread patriarchal promise into a complex 12-tribe national administration. The sons standing around that bed, they are the embryonic heads of Israel's tribes.
And the text underscores the formality of this transition immediately. Like, in verses 1 and 2, Jacob does not casually ask his sons to gather around. The Hebrew text uses a dual imperative to demand their absolute attention. Yeah. Verse 2 says, "Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel your father." Notice the double naming there. He calls them the sons of Jacob, which appeals to their natural lineage and biological reality. But then he says, listen to Israel your father.
Right. And Israel is the specific covenant name given to him by God after he wrestled with the angel at Peniel.
Yes.
So he is pulling rank here. He is not just talking as dad.
He is establishing his authority as the inspired mouthpiece of the covenant God. The words are coming from a man who has been broken and mastered by the Lord, and he tells them he will reveal what will happen to them in the end of days.
Okay, that sounds intense.
It is. The Hebrew phrase there is be'akaret hayamim, In the ancient text, this phrase occurs 14 times, and it is almost exclusively used in prophetic and eschatological contexts.
So it is looking way ahead.
Right. It looks down the corridors of time. The decrees Jacob is about to utter are not localized to their immediate lives in Goshen, or even just their initial occupation of Canaan centuries later. These decrees extend to the sovereign, final settlements of Israel's history.
You know, I look at our modern culture, and the contrast is just glaring.
Yeah.
Today, society views identity as something entirely self-created. Like the constant message is, declare yourself, and you will become what you desire. You are the author of your own destiny.
Oh, absolutely. That is the modern mantra.
Right. But this scene in Genesis flips that completely upside down. Jacob's summons is like a judge reading a final, unalterable verdict. In this covenant courtroom, identity is not self-made. Destiny is not self-authored. It is declared by a higher authority.
Yes.
These 12 men are going to be told who they are and what their descendants will become, and they have absolutely zero leverage to negotiate the terms.
They just have to stand there and listen. And if that summons establishes the absolute authority of the speaker, we have to look at the son standing at the front of the line. We move to verse 3, where Jacob lists Reuben's inherent privileges.
The pedestal.
Right, the pedestal. The text piles up 5 distinct titles of physical honor. Jacob calls him Reuben, my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my generative force, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in vigor.
I mean, that is a staggering list of accolades.
Yeah.
He is building Reuben up with every possible title of honor.
He is. And to understand the weight of those titles, we have to look at ancient Near Eastern inheritance laws. Being the firstborn, the Bikor, carried a massive cultural and economic weight.
Okay, explain that a bit more.
So the firstborn received the double portion of the inheritance. If there were 12 sons, the estate was divided into 13 parts, and the firstborn got 2.
Oh. Okay.
This was designed to keep the central family estate solvent and strong. Furthermore, before the institution of the Levitical priesthood, the firstborn held the priestly leadership of the home.
So he was the spiritual head, too.
Yes, the spiritual head. He also held royal preeminence among his brothers, acting as the designated leader representing the clan in legal and political matters.
Wow. So Reuben is the designated political leader, the priest, and the primary economic heir, all rolled into one person.
That is right.
And Jacob even calls him the beginning of his strength, referring to the fact that Reuben was the product of Jacob's prime physical years. Jacob acknowledges that Reuben possessed all the natural rights of superiority. He had the excess of dignity and the excess of physical vigor.
He was the guy.
Yeah, he was the guy who was supposed to be the stabilizing, load-bearing pillar of the entire household.
The natural expectation was that Reuben would assume total control the moment Jacob took his last breath.
But, you know, I have to ask a critical question here, especially for anyone listening who wrestles with the theological framework of God's sovereignty. If God knows the end from the beginning, why grant someone such immense, undeniable natural advantages if he already knows that person is going to fail?
It is a profound, well, a very heavy question.
Right? Like, why give Reuben the birthright, the dignity, and the leadership if God knows it is all going to end in disaster? It feels like the text is setting him up on a massive pedestal just to knock him down.
And the text is doing that, but it does so to prove a theological reality. The listing of these honors in verse 3 is not designed to flatter Reuben. It is designed to establish the terrifying height from which he is about to plummet.
Oh, wow.
It demonstrates that privilege is not a shield against judgment. In fact, privilege magnifies accountability.
Right.
The more a person is given, the more a person is given, the more weighty their stewardship becomes.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Having the right last name, the right Ivy League education, or the right position in the family hierarchy does not insulate you from divine scrutiny. If anything, it puts a massive spotlight on you.
Reuben had the advantage of position before he had ever demonstrated an ounce of character. By listing all these natural advantages, the narrative shows us that physical lineage, intellectual talent, and natural gifts are completely useless when they are accompanied by a corrupt internal state. The fleshly firstborn is weighed in the scales of absolute holiness and found utterly deficient. That spotlight leads directly to the sudden, catastrophic verdict in verse 4.
Let us read the diagnosis, because it is rough. Jacob says, "Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence." I mean, it is a brutal whiplash. One second, he is the preeminent son, and the next second, he is diagnosed with a fatal flaw.
The author utilizes a rare and highly vivid Hebrew term here, pachaz. It translates to bubbling over or unstable as water.
Hachaz.
Yes, and this specific root occurs only 4 times in the entire Hebrew Bible. It is a highly specific physical metaphor for moral failure.
Instead of using standard, tri-legal terms for sin, the text gives us a visual. And I really want to break down that boiling water metaphor for you because it hits so hard. Think about the physical properties of water.
It is formless on its own.
Right. Water is incredibly useful, but only when it is channeled between firm, unyielding banks. It can irrigate a desert, it can sustain life, it can generate massive energy. But water has no internal structure of its own. It takes the shape of whatever contains it.
Exactly.
And when you heat that water until it boils over the sides of a pot, or when a river floods past its banks without any restraint, it destroys everything in its path. It ruins the container, it sweeps away houses, it devastates the land.
And that is Reuben. He had all this natural vigor, all this energy, but he had zero internal banks. He lacked moral restraint.
His outward actions were simply the destructive overflow of completely undisciplined inward condition. He just followed whatever passion was heating him up at the moment.
And because he lacked that internal structure, the judicial sentence delivered by Jacob is absolute. The grammar here intensifies the judgment.
How so?
Well, Jacob delivers a sovereign command through a negative helifiljussive.
What?
A negative helifiljussive. It is a grammatical form that essentially translates to, you shall not leave a remnant of excellence.
Whoa, not even a remnant.
Right. The very preeminence he was supposed to inherit is actively stripped away from him. It is a total revocation of his status.
The hammer drops. But, the text forces us to look backward to find out what caused this boiling water to overflow. Like, what specific historical event caused him to lose the birthright?
To find the historical ground for the indictment, we have to look decades earlier, to an event recorded in Genesis 35.22.
Okay.
The family was traveling near a place called Migdal Eder in the land of Canaan, and the text states with painful, chilling brevity, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it.
See, to a modern reader, that sounds like a terrible immoral act, maybe a dark family secret or a crime of passion. But it is actually an ancient Near Eastern soap opera with massive geopolitical consequences, is it not?
It is. We must contextualize this using ancient Near Eastern legal customs, such as those codified in the Code of Hammurabi. In that cultural matrix, a son's sexual relations with his father's wife or concubine was not a mere crime of passion.
It was not just a fling.
No, it was domestic treason. Bilhah had been Rachel's maidservant and was the mother of 2 of Jacob's other sons, Dan and Naphtali. By uncovering his father's nakedness, Reuben was making an aggressive public bid to usurp the headship of the clan before his father had died.
It is a political coup.
Yes, precisely.
It reminds me of Absalom pitching a tent on the roof of the palace and sleeping with King David's concubines in 2 Samuel.
That is a perfect parallel.
Right. It is a brazen physical declaration to the whole world that says, the old man is finished. I am the man in charge now.
That is the precise historical parallel. It was a direct attack on the household order and a desecration of the family's sanctity. And the language Jacob uses in verse 4 confirms the severity of the act. He says, for you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it.
Defiled it.
Yeah. The text uses a peel perfect verb there, chalalta, which denotes an intensive, aggressive action. This was a complete intentional desecration of something that was meant to be holy. The father's bed represents lawful intimacy and household authority. Reuben invaded it and profaned it.
But the timeline of this whole situation is what really fascinates me. I mean, Genesis 35 says Jacob heard of it, but he did nothing at the time.
He was silent.
Yeah, he did not banish Reuben. He did not execute the severe physical punishments that were culturally expected for usurpers. Decades pass. Reuben continues to live with the family. He goes down to Egypt with them. He interacts with Joseph. He eats at the family table.
Everything looks normal.
Right. It is like a dormant computer virus. The malicious code was injected into the system decades ago at Migdal Eder, but it just sat there, quietly hiding in the background while everyday operations continued. It only executes its destructive payload decades later right here on Jacob's deathbed. So I have to ask, does a delay in consequence mean God has forgotten the crime?
No, the text argues the exact opposite. The delay we see between Genesis 35 and Genesis 49 is a period of quiet, heavy waiting. The biblical narrator leaves the judgment unspoken for a time, but the moral evaluation of the act is never absent. God's justice does not suffer from amnesia.
It's just suspended.
Suspended until the appointed time of reckoning. A sin can be old in chronological time, but completely fresh in its moral consequence. Decades had passed, but the offense was not erased from the household's ledger.
Wow.
When Jacob finally speaks, it breaks into a storm of judgment. This teaches us that forgiveness and temporal consequences are two entirely different categories. Reuben is not cast out of the nation of Israel entirely, but he permanently loses his usefulness, his honor, and his preeminence.
That is a terrifying reality check for you, the listener. Just because the sky does not fall the moment you cross a boundary does not mean the sky is not going to fall eventually.
Exactly.
The stripping of Reuben's rights was not just about punishing one unstable man. It set off a chain reaction that reshaped the entire architecture of the Bible.
It drastically subverts human order. If we zoom out to look at the literary structure of Genesis, we see the birthright literally torn from Reuben and fractured into pieces.
Wait, looking at the division of the birthright, it feels almost chaotic. Joseph gets the double portion of wealth, Levi eventually gets the priesthood, and Judah gets the royal crown. Why shatter the inheritance into 3 pieces instead of just handing the whole package to the next oldest son, Simeon?
Well, the text actually addresses Simeon and the third brother, Levi, in the very next verses. They are disqualified from holding the unified birthright because of their own unchecked violence and cruelty in the massacre at Shechem, which is recorded in Genesis 34.
Oh, right. They murdered an entire city.
Yes. Because the oldest 3 sons all prove to be morally defective, the privileges are distributed. The double portion of inheritance goes to Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, whom Jacob formally adopted.
So that takes care of the wealth aspect.
Right. And the priestly leadership eventually lands with the tribe of Levi, but only after they demonstrate zeal for the Lord centuries later during the Golden Calf incident. And the royal scepter, the right to rule, is transferred to the 4th son, Judah.
So Reuben loses on all 3 fronts. He loses the money, the altar, and the throne.
He does. And this highlights a massive recurring pattern in the biblical narrative. God deliberately bypasses the natural firstborn time and time again.
It is a theme.
It is. We see God accept the younger brother Abel's sacrifice over Cain, the firstborn. He chooses Isaac, the child of promise, over the older Ishmael. He elects Jacob over his older twin Esau. Even when Jacob blesses Joseph's sons, he crosses his arms and puts his right hand on the younger son Ephraim instead of the older Manasseh.
For God's blessing refuses to mechanically follow human custom. The text makes the case that God consistently bypasses fleshly expectations to prove that inheritance relies entirely on divine grace, not natural birth order.
And we see the literal historical fallout of this verdict for the tribe of Reuben. Think about the original audience reading this text. Moses compiled these words on the plains of Moab, writing to the wilderness generation of Israel. They are standing right on the edge of Canaan, ready to enter the land.
And as they move into the conquest of Canaan, the tribe of Reuben actually looks at the lush, grazing land outside the Promised Land on the east side of the Jordan River, and they decide to settle there instead.
They do. And in the subsequent history of the nation, the tribe of Reuben never produces a single judge.
Not one.
Not one. They never produce a prophet, a king, or a heroic military commander. During the era of the judges, in the famous Song of Deborah, the tribe of Reuben is mocked for sitting among the sheepfolds, listening to the piping for the flocks, while the other tribes are out fighting for the survival of the nation.
Wow, just completely sidelined.
Yes, they become numerically weak, politically insignificant, and completely marginalized. They are a living, breathing sermon on Jacob's phrase, "You shall not excel."
Imagine how that would hit the original Israelite audience. I mean, they're looking across the Jordan River at Canaan, a land filled with pagan sensuality, temple prostitution, and moral lawlessness.
It was a very dangerous environment.
Yeah, and Moses is warning them not to adopt the practices of the pagans. Seeing the tribe of Reuben fade into absolute obscurity was stark. Physical proof that having covenant status does not insulate anyone from divine judgment if they engage in defilement. It is a severe warning against presumption.
It proves that moral stability is an essential requirement for dwelling in the presence of a holy God. But, this massive structural failure of the fleshly firstborn leaves a gaping hole in the narrative.
Right.
If the natural firstborn always fails, if Cain fails, if Ishmael fails, if Esau fails, if Reuben fails, who can actually hold the inheritance? If humanity cannot produce a stable firstborn, what is the solution?
This is where the theological framework of the text really points forward. The history of the natural firstborn is a history of forfeited inheritance, moral ruin, and judicial disqualification. Reuben is the son of privilege, but he possesses no faithful obedience.
Son.
He has firstness according to the flesh, but he cannot bear the moral weight of preeminence. So where do we find the one who can?
In our theological tradition, we look to how the New Testament authors resolve this tension. The absolute failure of Reuben is designed to point the reader directly to the necessity of a supernatural firstborn.
Yes.
We look to Colossians chapter 1. The Apostle Paul declares that Jesus Christ is the firstborn of every creature and the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence. The contrasts between Reuben and Christ are starkly laid out by the biblical authors.
Let us break down those contrasts because they are vivid. Think about Reuben. Reuben bubbled over with unstable passion. He was reckless, driven by his base appetites, and completely lacked internal banks.
In contrast, the New Testament presents Christ standing in the Garden of Gethsemane in steadfast submission. Facing the crushing weight of divine wrath, he did not bubble over or seek to escape. He maintained perfect internal structure and declared, "Not my will, but thine be done."
Oh, that is so good. And Reuben aggressively ascended his father's bed to defile it. He brought pollution and shame to his household just to steal glory for himself.
And the gospel accounts argue that Christ ascended the cross of Calvary to make a perfect, undefiled atonement. He bore the shame of defilers without becoming defiled himself, offering his life to cleanse the household of God.
Reuben grasped at forbidden glory and lost his honor.
While Christ humbled himself to the point of death, and therefore God highly exalted him, giving him the name that is above every name.
I just love how this reframes the whole narrative. The text does not tell us to read Genesis 49 and just say, well, try harder to be a stable Reuben. Just muster up more willpower so you do not boil over.
No, that would be moralism.
That is sheer moralism.
Yes.
That is telling a man with no legs to just try harder to walk. The theological framework here demands that we look completely away from our own human strength. We have to realize that our own flesh is just as unstable as Reuben's. The argument is that our only hope is to join ourselves to the only one who actually possesses eternal preeminence. We have to be united to Christ.
And that union with Christ is the mechanism through which believers receive an inheritance. We receive what we could never secure by natural right or moral record. Christ is presented as the faithful heir who shares his riches with those who have squandered theirs. This is a grace that produces repentance and gratitude rather than presumption.
Seeing this ultimate fulfillment drastically alters how a modern individual should look at their own life and habits. It bridges the gap between 1850 BC and today.
It really does.
The historical and grammatical truths of Genesis 49 are not dead museum pieces. They cut straight through the spiritual complacency of our modern age. So let us bring the theological weight of this text into the daily life of the listener.
The first application we must address is the modern error of antinomianism.
Okay, unpack that.
This is the false idea that because believers are under grace, personal holiness is optional. There is a theology today that presumes upon grace, claiming that covenant status insulates us from the requirement of moral stability. It assumes God grades on a curve, or that he simply turns a blind eye to our private behavior as long as we profess the right beliefs.
But the text makes the case that God demands moral stability. Reuben's story dismantles any comfort we might find in a grace that ignores sin. In our Reformed tradition, we look at this and see that the Holy Spirit provides the grace of sanctification to turn a double-minded, unstable man into someone with solid character.
Yes.
God did not just justify the ungodly, he sanctifies them.
A gifted but unstable man will damage a family, a church, or a nation. Human strength must be bounded by the fear of God.
I look at modern leadership culture, and I see the spirit of Reuben everywhere. Let us step away from the ancient world and imagine a modern tech startup.
Okay, a tech startup.
Yeah, you have a charismatic founder. He has brilliant ideas. He secures billions in venture capital funding. He builds a stunning glass headquarters, and the press loves him. He has incredible natural vigor.
The excess of strength.
Exactly. But internally, the company has zero compliance departments, no accounting controls, and no ethical guardrails. The CEO just acts on every impulse. Pragmatism looks at the massive valuation and asks, is he talented? Can he draw a crowd? It measures the glass facade.
Right.
But the text asks, is he pure? Is he governed by self-control? Does he have firm banks holding in the water? We elevate people based on their natural vigor, their excess of strength, just like Reuben. And then everyone acts shocked when the inevitable audit comes, the hidden corruption is exposed, and the internal instability brings the whole billion-dollar empire crashing down in a single day.
That analogy hits the mark. The lack of internal controls inevitably leads to external collapse. And this brings us to the urgency of secret sins, because Reuben's sin was committed out of the public eye.
Right, it was quiet.
It was a hidden defilement. He assumed that because the hammer of judgment did not fall that afternoon at Migdal Eder, he had gotten away with it.
And many people today operate under the exact same delusion. We think that hidden compromises, dishonest business dealings, or private lusts are safely buried just because they are kept off the internet or hidden from our spouses. We think time erases guilt.
But time does not erase guilt. The biblical text declares, "Be sure your sin will find you out." We must appeal directly to you, the listener here. Do not wait for your own deathbed of judgment to face the reality of your hidden actions. Do not assume that silence from heaven means safety.
That is a chilling warning.
The call is to seek cleansing now. If you are dealing with an unstable soul, if you are letting your appetites boil over the banks of God's commands, you need to bring that into the light. Confess it. Flee to the steadfast firstborn who can actually cleanse that defilement.
We have covered massive ground today. We started in a tense, dimly lit deathbed chamber in Egypt, where a father gathered his sons for a final, unalterable decree. We looked at the boiling, reckless instability of a privileged son who thought his pedigree made him untouchable.
We saw it all fall apart.
Yeah, we saw how his hidden treason resulted in the sovereign scattering of his birthright, a loss of preeminence that echoed through generations. And finally, we saw how the theological framework of the text points to the steadfast perfection of Christ, the true firstborn who secured the inheritance we could never earn.
The narrative arc from human failure to divine provision is clear, and the historical warnings remain sharp.
So I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your week.
Right.
Our modern culture constantly disciples people to believe that acting like unstable water, following every sudden passion, every impulse, and every desire without restraint is the ultimate form of authenticity and freedom.
They celebrate it.
They do. They tell you that building banks around your desires is oppressive. But consider this. What if society's definition of freedom is what the text identifies as the very instability that strips away your true inheritance? Where in your own life might you be letting your waters boil over, calling it freedom while it silently erodes your foundation? Seek the steadfast banks of divine truth and rest in the only Son whose inheritance can never be shaken.